Hello there. Welcome to Tuck in Cash. Thanks for joining us for another episode of European Expansion Bootcamp. So it's a new series that Flan from Winging It and I put together where we talk all things about the new European expansion that's coming to digital Wingspan soon. So we talk about all the birds and all the new power and new strategy. And without further ado, let me introduce my partner in this series, Flan. How are you doing, Flan?
Hello, I'm doing very well, thank you. Thanks for having me back on.
Yeah, so this is part two of the series where we're gonna talk about the when play power. So birds that give you one-time power when you play them. So in previous two part, we talk about the two power and the ping power. So make sure you check them out in either my channel or Flan's channel. So if you are ready, we'll get started.
Let's do it.
All right. So let's start with this category of birds. So I divided all the when play power birds into different categories. So if you look at this, it's pretty clear that what we have here are the new type of predators. We have eight new predators that has a when play power being introduced in this expansion. They're kind of special. So if you look at um, on the food cost for each of this bird, they have a star. When you see the star, that means they have an alternative food cost. So we can look at the four birds on the left first. So when you play this bird on the left, for each rodent in the food cost, instead of paying the rodent, you may pay by tugging one card from your hand behind this card. So, what do you think of this new way of playing Predator by paying cards?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, and it's a very different way to think about food costs for birds because,
Mm-hmm.
ordinarily I think birds that cost more food, obviously they're going to get you more points, but they're more difficult to play.
Yeah.
So I think if you didn't have this alternative way of paying for the birds, certainly something like the Benelli's eagle, those three rodents are going to be really difficult to come by.
Yeah.
But I think this is the interesting part of this category is that the birds that cost more food are actually stronger
Yeah.
because they cost more food,
Yeah.
which is a very different way of kind of assessing food costs, like I was saying. So, yeah, I think certainly the two eagles in that middle row, they're kind of the pick of the bunch for me. I think if you can make the most out of that power and use some extra cards in your hand instead of food, I just think even in the base game, getting cards is so easy to do, and you
Mm-hmm.
more often than not find that at the end of the game you've got a few cards left over that you don't want to play and that you can't tuck or you can't turn them into points otherwise. I think having these two birds, essentially that Benelli's Eagle, that's 11 points
Yeah.
with those three tuck cards, which is
Yes.
just huge for no food. To get that down at the end of the game, that's just a huge point bomb to get down.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking at the Imperial Eagle and the Bonelli's Eagle, those are definitely huge points bomb. And like you say, it gives you more leeway of like drawing cards more to try to dig for the cards that you need because if you have this bird in hand, then you can always tuck those cards that you don't want to play and turns them into point. So that's some kind of insurance there once you have this bird in your hand. From my perspective, I think the Sparrowhawk and the Goshawk can be quite useful in early game as well. To say you don't have a forest and you need to build up your forest, and these two birds give you an easy way to build up forest without gaining food first if you have
Yeah,
extra
I think you're
cards.
right. Yeah, I think there's a number of these kinds of birds in the base game that don't cost any food. So we've got the vultures and we've got the condor that I know you really like. So those are always good options for just extending that out. Maybe as a filler bird in the forest, just to at least get you a little bit of extra food generation.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think certainly these two birds, like you say, you can kind of gamble on the deck a little bit more. You maybe
Mm-hmm.
spend that one extra turn going for cards. And if you don't get what you're looking for, it doesn't matter because you can tuck them under birds like the sparrowhawk and the goshawk, get those down really easily, and get a few points. So yeah, I think these are good options certainly. And yeah, if you compare this with something like the rodentologist or the falconer bonus card, that's just gonna get you even more points.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one thing that I like about this bird as well. They fulfill both the predator and rodentologist, and yeah,
Yeah,
with those bonus card, you just kind of get even more points.
absolutely. Yeah.
And yeah, and then next we move on to, for the predator on the right. So again, they have the alternative food cost here where instead of paying the cost on the card, you can play this predator on top of another bird, and you have to discard any eggs and any food that's on the bird, and that bird become a tuck card. So it is technically a hunting activation, I believe.
Yep.
So yeah, you hunt another bird and then you play this bird on top, and they each give you 4 points. So what do you think about this bird?
Yeah, these ones are a bit trickier. I
Mm-hmm.
think they are a lot more situational
Yes.
than the four birds we already looked at. So I think those first four birds, they're going to work in almost any setup with those extra cards that you have.
Yes.
I think for the most part, these kinds of birds that you play on top of another bird, it has to be a very specific kind of bird that you're playing it on top of, because you got to remember that you're essentially sacrificing all those points
Yes.
of that bird. So if you play it on a bird that's worth points, you're going to be losing points there. So
Yeah.
I think you've got to look for a bird that's worth either 0 or 1 points to make it
Mm-hmm.
worthwhile doing. But yeah, it's tricky with these birds because I feel like the most suitable time that you'd want to be using these is kind of later in the game, because traditionally I think those low point birds are going to have nice brown powers that you'd look to activate.
Yep.
So you don't want to cover those birds over too early
Mm-hmm.
with one of these four predators, because then you're going to miss out on that brown power. But the problem for me is that I think normally later in the game you're going to have better options. So you probably have a bigger point bird that you could play, or maybe you could lay eggs for more points. I
Yeah.
think if you're only going to be getting 4 points from each of these birds,
Mm-hmm.
obviously with the additional tucked card of the bird that you're hunting, I think for me I'd only be looking to play these if I compare them, with a nice bonus card.
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree with you. I don't think this bird are, your top, like anyone top choice when it comes to late game. I mean, if you look at, typical late game, if you set up an engine, say the grassland engine, like scoring 4 or 5 points is not that difficult. And this
Right.
bird really doesn't give, that much more points if you just hunt like, one bird with low points. But I would say like, yeah, again, like if there's a situation where you have the right bonus card, then suddenly with the rodentologist, for example, then you can get extra 2 points that might be worth it. And then another thing I like about the common buzzard and the hobby is, they can live in any habitat and only cost one food. So in really desperate situation where you don't have better option for say your forest or wetland, this might be the desperate option to have something in those habitat.
Yeah, I mean it's a good point. These powers are always optional, so you don't
Yeah,
always have to use the alternative costs. You could, play, for example, the common buzzard in your wetlands for a single rodent, and yeah, if that's the only option you have for your
yeah,
wetlands, then it is at least better than nothing. And again, I think if you do have the rodentologist or the falconer, and you are able to get a couple of extra points,
y-
then certainly that would go a long way to help, convince me playing one of these birds.
yeah, absolutely. All right, so we have seen quite a few predators here. So let's move on to the next set of birds here. So we have so this bird with very similar when play power. So basically for this category of birds here, when you play this bird, you can play it sideways so it covers two spaces in one of the habitat, and you always pay the lower egg cost. So how do you value this power?
I'm just going to come out and say it. I
Yes.
don't like these
You don't
powers
like
at
this
all.
power. Interesting.
No, very
Okay.
controversial, I know.
Well, tell me about it.
I just find it very difficult to justify the food cost for the low points and
Mm-hmm.
kind of the minimal return in. I know you're kind of extending particularly the forest or the wetlands out that extra spot.
Mm-hmm.
That's always a nice option.
Yeah.
But I just think in the base game there are much better options in all the habitats. I mean, if I look at something like the heron, getting two fish early in the game is so difficult.
Yeah.
You kind of need the bird feeder to be cooperating.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, even then, you're paying two fish and only getting 3 points. That's quite hard to justify. And
Yeah.
then even those two forest birds, the blackbird, I'd have to gain food once before playing it, so that's already a turn
Right.
that I've only gained one food. And then the long-tailed tit, two food, 0 points. That's a difficult sell
Yeah.
for me. So I think I would only be playing these in very specific situations.
Mm-hmm.
I think for the most part, there are going to be better options.
Okay. All right. I mean, I don't think I hate them or I dislike them as much as you do. There are definitely some of this bird that I like better than the other.
Right.
I think the European roller is definitely, not a good play for me. I just don't, like you say, spending two food on a bird that doesn't give you brown power, um, especially in the grassland, I just don't think you really need that. You are much better saving those grassland space to, build up an engine of some kind. So, the European role are definitely my least favorite of the bunch. I think if I want to pick one, I think I'll probably say gray heron is my favorite of all this bird, because the way I think about it, it costs two fish, but if you start with it, and you pick up one fish and you can play this to cover two spaces, basically you spend only two turns to play two bird in the wetland and allows you to draw two cards when you activate your wetland. So if you compare this to, say a normal way to build up your wetland, you have to play one bird, lay eggs, and then play another bird. So that's three turns. So you save some tempo there. And the thing I also like about it is, you pay the lower egg cost. So if you start with the gray heron in your wetland, you basically don't have to spend any eggs to have, two birds, so to speak, in the wetland. So I think that's not a bad way to kickstart your wetland.
Yeah, I mean, you make some good points. I think, you do get that short-term benefit, like you say, within 3 turns, you
Mm-hmm.
filled up those two spaces, and you are able to get some extra card draw. And certainly, I think that's the priority. We talked about this before. Just being able to build up your wetlands and get yourself access to extra
Right.
cards is so important. So, yeah, I think favorite is a strong word, but least unfavorite. Is that
Okay.
a way that I could put it?
Yeah.
That's how I'd categorize the heron.
Yeah. I think, yeah, from I think heron will have some good use. We'll see. In terms of the forest, again, I think, I can kind of make the same argument for the long-tailed tit. You cover two space of forest in one turn potentially because you only could cost one grub and a grain. You don't have to pay an egg. And 4-star net spot is a good value like in many game. It can potentially win you many end of round goals. So there could be additional points you can score from the tit here, but obviously without a brown power it's always bad for the forest. So yeah, I think I won't be mad playing the tit either, but the blackberry with the three food costs, definitely, yeah, I don't see many situation I'll play that.
No, definitely to me feels a little bit too expensive.
All right. So those are the, birds that you can play sideway. So now let's move on. Maybe let's look at some of this bird that I have over here. Um, all right. So we have this group of birds here. So when you play them, you get to draw one bonus card, and then you get to pick to gain one resource. So some allows you to gain food, some give you an option to pick either food, cards, or eggs. Um, yeah, what do you think, Flan?
I think these are very interesting birds. I think particularly later in the game,
Mm-hmm.
being able to gain a card or gain a food without having to take that specific action can be really powerful. There are a
Yes.
number of times that I can think of, late in a game where I think, oh, if only I had one more food, I could play
Yeah.
this big point bird. And it's often not worth spending that turn
Mm-hmm.
gaining food because you might be only getting a point or maybe even no points from that turn.
Right.
And it might, work out actually better to just lay eggs. I
Mm-hmm.
think if you have, one of these birds that lets you gain that extra food, or maybe it's pick up a card in the tray,
Mm-hmm.
that's a really nice option to have. So yeah, I like these birds a lot.
Yeah. I think you are right. In the late game, being able to use this power to gain the one resource that you need, either a bird in the tray that you want to pick up, or like, getting that food can be very useful. I must point out though again, you only draw one new bonus card, so you don't get to pick one of the two. So I think in terms of risk factor, it's higher risk there that you might draw one bonus card that just doesn't give you any extra points.
Yeah, I think you're right. It is high risk, and it's certainly a good thing to point out.
Mm-hmm.
In the base game, we're very used to that idea of drawing two and keeping the best one. And there are a number of times where you'll draw two, and one of them might be worth 3 or 4 points, and the other one's going to be worth zero.
Yeah.
So there is certainly that risk that you are going to draw something that's not going to get you many points. But I think it's not as big of a risk as a lot of people make it out to be.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those where, on average, I probably value it as about 1 point less. So I
Yeah.
think you having that choice of two versus just drawing one, I think is gonna be worth about one more point. And for me, that's kind of mitigated here in the fact that you gain an extra resource. So I think, on average, if you play enough games with enough of these birds, I think it's gonna even out. So that factor of only drawing one bonus card doesn't put me off too much here.
Okay. I think one way I would like to see how this bird being used, or where I think it's being useful is, again, we talk about late game, but I'm thinking like maybe in like early mid game, like round one or round two, where resources are still kind of tight. So say if
Mm.
you play this bird and you can gain a food or a bird that allows you to, play another bird and win an end of round goals. So that could, gain you additional points swing there. So I think that could be a useful situation for this bird too.
Yeah, I mean it's a really good point. I think normally these kind of bonus card giving birds, we don't see them played that much in the early game in the
Mm-hmm.
base game
Yeah.
because it can be quite a big investment, two or three food, and it's nice having that bonus card early because it gives you something to work towards, but it's not gaining you any resources. It doesn't have that strong brown power that normally you look to build up in each of these habitats. But yeah, certainly I think, you look at those three in the lower row. I think if you can play one of those and gain an egg without having to lay eggs, it might help you for that end of round goal, but it might just help you play that second forest bird or
Yeah.
play that second wetland bird that
Yeah.
one turn sooner. And that is just such a nice option to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, now that we have done three parts of this video, I don't know, I just see a lot of the new power with this bird can really make a, surprise difference with the end of round goals, with the swing with the end of round goals. So maybe we can talk a little bit more about this in the future, but I feel like the end of round goal maybe will become even more relevant and contentious in with this new expansion.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested to see how the balance of those end of round goals changes with the new expansion.
All right, so we have the last pair of one play power birds here. So they each cost three food, and that's the same power. So when you play it, you get to draw one new bonus card, and after that, you get to draw three new bird cards and keep one of them. So, any thoughts on these birds?
Yeah, I think again, like the four birds we just looked at, I think these are really strong in that late game in particular. I
Mm-hmm.
think these are probably better in the late game
Yeah.
because it's just more points. It's obviously a higher resource cost in the food cost, so you're probably going to have more easy access to that kind of food late in the game.
Yeah.
But again, it's just for me about being able to gain cards on a turn without having to go to your wetlands, especially in that last round, is so important.
Yeah.
I generally don't like spending a turn in that last round drawing cards if it's not going to score me points, because it does feel like a bit of a waste.
Yep,
And so
absolutely.
sometimes, maybe there's a big point bird in the tray. If you spend a turn to pick that up and another turn to play it, that's 2 turns, and you maybe were better off just laying eggs for those 2 turns. But certainly these two birds, I think, they've got that flexibility as well. You can either draw from the deck or the tray if there's something
Yeah.
nice. So, and you do that after you've seen the bonus card. So there's certainly potential for you to pick up a bonus card and then look at 3 birds and keep one of those that fits with that bonus card as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I like about this two birds is, if you compare this to other bonus card bird from the base game that you play in the wetland, they typically cost like either fish or rodent, which are,
Right.
harder fruit to gain. And like grain and grub are definitely way easier to gain and to play. So I think that's the advantage there too.
Yeah, really, really good point.
Yeah. All right, there you have it. That's the overview of all the Wemplay Powerbird from the European expansion. Thank you, Flan, for joining me today. And as always, stay tuned for more of this series. Make sure you check out Flan channel as well for future episodes. With that, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.
Yep, thanks everyone for watching.
And cut.